We are live.
Hello and welcome to our ISE Fireside Webinar today. Our topic is the danger within the risk insider threats posed to an organization's data. We're thrilled to have Code 42 as our sponsor today. A couple of just welcoming remarks and housekeeping items. First and foremost, want to make sure everyone is welcome, and we again appreciate Code 42 sponsoring us today. You will earn 1 CPE credit for participating in today's webinar, but you do need to participate in its completion. At the end of the session today, you'll be able to enter your CPE number if you did not do so when you registered. And tomorrow you'll receive notification that you received, that you participated in today's webinar. So don't exit the webinar early or you'll miss out on the opportunity to complete the survey. We will also be accepting Q&A, and we'll do that at 2:35 this afternoon. And please put your questions in the Q&A window. That will make sure we separate that from the chat, but we definitely want to answer all your questions, and please ask them as you think about them. So let's go ahead and introduce our panelists for today. All right, well, we are excited to have a great panel, and I have to say this is a power panel of women. Not normally do we have, and this was not by design, it sort of just ended up this way, but I have to say it's very exciting to have a great group of talented and very awesome cybersecurity women with us today. Janet, I'd love for you to introduce yourself.
Sure, thanks Marci. Hi everyone, I'm Janet Hines. I'm with iHeartMedia. I've as a CISO, and I've actually just joined in early July, so I'm fairly new, just coming up on my 90 days, I think, and I'm happy to be here.
Well, congratulations on the new opportunity, and we're glad to have you with us today. And Marion, thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Good afternoon. So I'm Marion Reed. I am head of IT security for Serta Simmons Betting. We have locations in US and Canada. And I actually joined Serta in January. So looking forward to this session and chatting with all of you.
Well, thanks, Marion, and again, congratulations on your opportunity as well. And JD, we're thrilled to have you here too with us today. Would you like to introduce yourself and then share a little bit about Code 42?
Sure, I'm JD Hansen. Thanks for having me. I am the CISO and the CIO currently at Code 42, and I've been in this role for about 4 years now. So I want to take a minute and just thank Marci for hosting this. Code 42 is delighted to be the sponsor. A little bit of background about what Code 42 is. So we are a software development company. We are located in Minneapolis, Colorado, overseas. We have lots of different locations, but our primary purpose is to deliver software for security teams, just like many of the security teams that you're on. Software that runs on endpoints, so whether it's Windows, Linux, or a Mac, and it looks at file movement across your user's activity. And so more specifically, we're tracking file movement, and we're watching end users' actions to identify risky movement of files that are proprietary to the company, that are moving external to different external locations outside of the organization. So think of employees emailing themselves stuff to their personal email addresses or uploading stuff to their personal Dropbox locations. Our software is sitting kind of behind the scenes, and it's monitoring all of those employee actions, serving up details as part of overview for your security team to dig in and ask questions and follow up to make sure that all of your company's information is protected and kept secure.
Well, awesome. Code 42 has a lot of great things going on. So again, thank you so much for your partnership and your sponsorship with us today. Well, how about, ladies, we go ahead and shift gears and dive into our conversations. How does that sound? Our first topic is going to be breaking news, the unnerving shift of insider threats. And believe me, insider threats can be certainly unnerving, especially as companies are evolving and they're trying to get a handle on their security controls, and the threat actors are accepting that challenge and evolving their tools and techniques and certainly their procedures out there but they have one game in mind, and that's really about stealing your data. We've seen already 2 security breaches recently that have made some headlines that have demonstrated change in the security landscape as it relates to the insider threat. And both have come with some pretty interesting some unique lessons for all of us to take away and learn about. The first was the Twitter breach, and it involved social engineering that targeted Twitter employees through a phone spear phishing attack. An attacker successfully gained access to Twitter's internal network and specific employee credentials. And that other attack involved a Nevada company where a Russian national contacted an internal employee identified as CHS1 to install malware on the employer's network in exchange for $1 million. I mean, that's sort of an interesting proposition. But the honest CHS1 employee contacted the FBI and rendered the attack unsuccessful. And then the threat actor was certainly arrested. And that doesn't always end that way. You had a real good Samaritan there. That's a real tempting offer of $1 million to do that. But with these types of attacks really had some different endings and outcomes. But I can only imagine with these companies out there what they went through during that time period. So Marion, I'd like to talk to you. I imagine that you've been working, you and your team, remotely during this time period. And a shift to a remote working environment has probably changed a little bit how you guys are dealing with some insider threat and incident response as well. Can you talk a little bit about the changes in behavior that you've seen around the insider threats and some of these interesting external actors kind of targeting maybe your employees?
Yeah, our number one issue around this is really with phishing emails, continues to be. So we've actually, what we've done is really heightened our training with our employees. We actually do a monthly phishing campaign with our employees to keep them on their toes and keep them very much aware that these attacks continue. They're not changing. They're getting more craftier as we go forward. We actually did something in the middle of going remote. We changed out some of the tools that we were using. And so we used some of that to really go after our employees on this phishing campaign, to really educate them, let them know, here's what you can expect when somebody's really trying to phish you and trying to get your credentials. The other key component that was really successful for us is rolling out multi-factor authentication. Huge benefit for us in doing that, but like what we talked about with Code 42 is really trying to monitor for activity. If we see a large increase in data being exfiltrated or being sent to a personal email address or whatever. So we have tried to really kick up what our monitoring capabilities are and what we're actually monitoring for.
Excellent, excellent. Janet, I'm kind of thinking about the 2020 Twitter breach that we just sort of mentioned earlier, as well as CHS1's behavior. I mean, it's pretty admirable, don't you think? But, some of the other insider threat stories that are coming to mind, and what sort of is top of mind for you as it, relates to mitigating the vulnerabilities revealed in these types of cases? And do you think everyone is sort of as a good Samaritan as CHS1?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very admirable. $1 million is very tempting. Very dedicated and loyal employee, and they were lucky to have them. For the, I think the common denominator here is people, right? And it's we can put all the technology and processes into place, but if it's the people that really are our biggest variable, if you will, because their behavior, their unintentional or sometimes intentional actions, dictate how effective our tools and processes are. And, the awareness that Marion talked about, raising awareness is huge. I've seen it to be very effective. People start self-reporting, which is great. When they see things, even if it's not suspicious, we still need to, recognize them for, even if it's not harmful, I should say malicious, it's still great that they recognize it and they come bring it forth and they start to see security as their responsibility and the protection of our data as their responsibility.
Well, wonderful. And JD, you know, you see it from a different perspective from, you know, from a vendor perspective, Code 42's perspective with your customers. But what are you kind of sharing right now with them for your clients about, you know, the general employees being educated and detecting those warning signs from the insider threats out there, especially ones that are really very good at targeting via social engineering techniques, and then now working remotely? You think that some of this education that we've had in place is even harder, you know, because we're in our home offices, and a lot of the things that we've learned when we're in our offices kind of have been thrown out the door. So that insider threat is truly inside some of the, you know, some people's desktops and in their homes. So maybe you could talk a little bit about what kinds of advisories and, you know, guidance you're giving your customers out there during these times.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the insider threats that we're dealing with now are our kids accidentally coming into your office and spilling something on your keyboard. No, yeah, I mean, I see it from both sides. I obviously run the internal security team at Code 42, and so we have a pretty robust insider threat program as part of the company. And then I obviously work with lots of our customers and get to talk to lots of different security teams and understand some of the challenges that are going on within those companies. And it's interesting. I think that the way that I approach security in everything changes based on kind of the shifting risk landscape. And so for inside threat, when we think about that, I certainly believe that the risk around this topic has certainly heightened with the change from working from home. We've decided to put a little bit more focus on this, ensure we have the right level of monitoring on our employees. Because if you think about the situation that's going on right now with everybody working from home, there's a couple things at play. First and foremost, we're a bit more casual. We have lots of distractions at home, puts us at a higher risk that we might accidentally make a mistake that puts our company's data at risk. So if we publicly share something that shouldn't have been publicly shared in Google and all these different platforms, the sharing aspect, it makes it really easy to make a mistake and accidentally share an important document that you didn't want to. The other thing that we have going on right now with our employees is that we're all more stressed. We're not just working from home, we're working from home during a really stressful time during a pandemic. And so, you know, we're also worried about our companies and our jobs, and you know, this leads to a higher degree of theft of company data. How long, you know, employees are thinking, how much longer am I going to have a job, and do I need to take this information to my next employer? So things like that, you know, come into play currently in the current situation that we're in. There was a stat that was in Dark Reading I think it was like 2 weeks ago, where it said with employees working from home, the data egress via email, cloud, USB was actually 80% higher in the very first month following the WHO's COVID pandemic declaration. And so we have a lot more risk to company data in this environment than we ever have.
That's a great transition and point for our next topic, really tackling the risks of data exfiltration. The remote environment has really kind of put forth some changes for all of us, especially around data exfiltration. And what we're seeing out there is recent data trends declaring that the data egress via email, cloud, and USB devices was 80% higher in the first month following COVID-19 pandemic declaration. So as a result, there's been quite a bit of malicious activity, as would be expected, but as increased incident response over the investigation, the sort of the castle on the hill security approach is definitely over for us now. And I think everyone's sort of taking a step back and looking outside the castle roles, so we can consider greater endpoint protections, as well as cloud to point device management tools that can really making some great configuration changes across all the devices out there, because the endpoints have really scattered out there. And to that point, we really have to think about enabling a secure business VPN service along with strong identity management policies. And of course, you know, having the online connections being secure, but we really have to do a lot of verification around identity. So let's just chat a little bit about that. Let's go back to JD on this. With the current remote work shift, has the risk tolerance, do you think, for the insider threats increased, you know, at your clients, or have you seen more approach security processes for the onboarding? And there's been offboarding too, which a lot of people don't think about right now. There's been, you know, certainly some downsizing of companies. So a little bit more complicated on the exit interview and getting the equipment back and having that computer that was, you know, once in the office, whatever, whether it be a laptop or, you know, a desktop or device, now is really at somebody's home. So there's a lot of data that's been traveling with them and homebound that normally would have been maybe inside the office wall. So, you know, with the shift, what are you seeing out there?
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, certainly a higher degree of risk to losing company data, you know, higher than probably I've ever seen in security before. With that said, I think a lot of teams are doing a really nice job adapting their processes, adapting how we do offboarding, how do we get people the right equipment. I run IT as well as security, and so part of my job is making sure that people have the right tools and laptop and whatnot to do their job, but it's also that I get that laptop back when the employee is no longer with the company. From an insider threat perspective, I think the onboarding and offboarding of employees is a really interesting process, and one that we have spent a ton of time kind of dissecting with our customers. So in the old days of approaching insider risk, we tried to find the most important data for the company and secured that data at all costs. I think now, the current days of insider risk, the right approach is really on that employee life cycle. So looking at when an employee joins a company, what data are they bringing into the company that might put the company at risk of litigation if they're stealing it from their past employer. And then when an employee is leaving a company, that is the point in time in the employee life cycle that we have the highest risk of data exfiltrating out of the company. And so that's the point in time where we're really looking at what has that employee been doing over the last 90 days? What data have they been moving to personal emails, personal Dropbox, things like that? And what data or what conversations do we need to follow up on to make sure that our company data isn't leaking to whatever competitor they're going to. We see this play out with all the autonomous vehicle manufacturers that are out there where people are leaving and stealing intellectual property and just taking it to the next autonomous vehicle maker. And so we see a lot of that, and we want to make sure that we're focusing on the people leaving as the highest risk point in that employee life cycle to ensure data is not leaving with them.
Well, you bring up a good point. So Janet, you know, what do you think is the potential impact on this data exfiltration on somebody's company? You know, there's a lot of different types of exfiltration, you know, as JD kind of alluded to, but, you know, what's sort of a red flag for you?
Well, I think, you know, the impact can be huge depending on the data, right? There's regulatory requirements that need to be met and certainly could cause harm to the operations of the company depending on, again, what the data is, including competitive advantage and all sorts of things that could impact, you know, operationally impact the company. I think what JD pointed out certainly about the red flags are if you have a good baseline of what the data movement is in your company, and then you can see the outliers from that baseline. A lot easier said than done, right? You have to have the right instrumentation. And there's, you know, it's kind of like, how do you know everything? You know, where everything is and where everything's going. So having an understanding of all of the applications, all of the assets that you have, like going back to IT asset management, all sorts of foundational conditions have to be in place in order to be able to really have a comprehensive program, a data loss prevention program across, you know, all of your points, emails, network, cloud, whether it's, VPN or, we're all working from home, so we have different ways of connecting, and seeing the movement across those certain areas. And I think one of the biggest challenges around data loss prevention program is the business rules, right? And so how do I know, outside of the obvious credit card, social security numbers, things that are formatted, how do you know what data, as an IT professional, right? How do I know what data the business doesn't want to lose? What's the crown jewels? What's the things we need to protect from a regulatory perspective? That's a little easier because it's defined by the regulations, but you really need the business's input to risk rank that data so that you can, because you don't want to protect it all the same, right? You want to protect the
system, sort of a data classification system is sort of what you're suggesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So Marion, preventing data from leaving and landing in the hands of external actors, from an internal employee, sort of the internal employee sort of has become the threat actor, or at least in collaboration potentially with the external threat actor. What kind of obstacles might be out there that make this detection and response really just more difficult for everybody? As an employer, it's got to give a little bit of heartburn, especially now where there's a false sense of security. I do know people that would work or think differently when they were in the office about how they managed their data or thought about their data. And then at home, inadvertently things, being printed. In some instances, I know there's been some limitations there, but some of that had to go out by the wayside. So how you're, but a lot of times also some of these devices and laptops and tablets might be sort of the kids' school vehicle as well, because they might have, might be the only, laptop for the home. So there might be a little bit of trade-off there. So I don't know, how are you guys thinking about it from a detection standpoint?
Yeah, so, that is really a difficult situation from a couple of different perspectives. We're fortunate, or I'm fortunate, in that we don't really allow bring your own device. We're moving to bring your own device related to your phone only, but as far as a laptop, we're going to supply that with you. So we put a lot more controls in place than actual detection at this point in time, which is a benefit for me. But when you think about the companies that have to be more open, depending on how their employees work, how much interaction they're having with their customers, how much data they're sharing with their customers, that changes that whole, and it makes it very complex. And so I think a lot of it, I'm a huge proponent, you've got to educate your employees and make sure that they're aware of how they're utilizing the data, how they're sharing the data. Yes, there's controls you can put in place, but I think it's a 50-50. I think you have to have both. So I think as much as you can streamline some of those processes as far as how people are sharing data, how they're doing file shares with external companies. And we actually kicked off a project recently where we're really looking closely at that. And how do you allow your employees to share data securely externally? I think that's a big thing for all of us. And then, when you're at home, if you are in a situation where you're providing, bring your own device, but it's a device where it's shared among the family members, you really got to think about and really educate your employees on how they need to handle that and the controls that they need to have in place at home, making sure they log off of their computer when they're going to pass it on to another family member. I think there's things that you can do, but I'm going to go back to, you've got to educate your resources to make them understand what the risk is and that the onus goes back to them. That they have as much responsibility to protect that data as the InfoSec team, and make them part of the, and I think also if you bring people into conversations and make them part of the solution, you actually have a much better win when you're trying to push solutions out to your audience.
So ladies, in the remote workforce training, we talked about with current employees and new ones out there. And everyone's stressed right now, you know, for a lot of different reasons. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, some people are going back to school remotely or in person or a hybrid approach and still working from home. And there's a lot of prone for mistakes to happen out there. And, you know, I think for most employees really have the best of intentions out there. But, you know, that data is still sometimes inadvertently getting outside of the network. And, you know, what is this sort of, where's your head at? I just love to get each of your thoughts on where your head is at overall with your employees, and you know what they're telling you or your friends are telling you, and just maybe some guidance out there, because this is a topic that I have heard over and over again from, you know, friends and family, neighbors and everything like that. And as security professionals out there, it's just, when you remember that we kind of say the cliche is what keeps us up at night, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is something to really keep us up at night, because it's something that kind of threw a curveball at us, and we're not really all set up for that. So Marion, maybe you could just sort of take a stab what you're sort of hearing out there, and how you guys are kind of helping to ratchet it down, even from a work-life balance perspective, you know, and so that
Yeah.
you're not making these kind of, you know, mistakes and then realizing like, oh my God, I made this mistake, you know, type of thing. So
Mm-hmm. You know, I think it goes back to, if you know your workforce and you can put some controls in place that are going to capture 75% of the oops, how did that happen? And then the other 30% working with them, understanding what their work process is, what their workflows are, then I think you have a better chance of putting the controls in place that are not going to hinder their business operations, but it's really going to help facilitate it in a secure way. So I think one is partner up with those businesses and, you know, that you're supporting, make sure those teams that you and your team understand what their processes are and what their normal business operations are, so you can have the right checks and balances in place. You know, when you think about what keeps you up at night and what are the major risks, I think all of us, it's that data exfiltration. How will I know you know, and I think the mistake that we make is we focus on large amounts of data. And so I think that's an easy catch. When you think about an attacker, a really sophisticated attacker, they're going to do it in more smaller chunks to go under the radar. And so it goes back to really understanding what that sensitive data is that you have in your organization. How well are you protecting it? And then if you've got resources, you know, that have to transmit that sensitive data commonly, will understand that and make sure that you help them and help them do it securely. So I've seen those kind of practices be a huge benefit, and I've seen people be willing to work with you because they do understand the risk, and I think that you can have a lot of success with that.
and Janet, you know, what kind of guidance are you sort of offering, you know, to colleagues and friends out there and family, just, you know, around this kind of topic? And, you know, with the temperatures up and the roller coaster rides and, you know, the uncertainty of some things out there, what I like to look at a glass half full, so that's what I've been trying to do out there, you know, with friends and family alike, and taking the temperature down and everything like that. What are you doing on that front, and just giving some best practices out?
Yeah, I mean, well, the last place I want a mistake to be made is by my security team, right? Because they really have access to critical systems and things, you know, that protect us and keep us out of harm's way. And so in conversations with my own team, just making sure people are able to still do their job, right? And have the right focus on their job when they are doing it. So we've all got, you know, whether we personally or we know people who have all these different scenarios because we are working remotely, right? They've either got their partner in the same room with them while they're on, you know, doing their job because they're sharing an office, or they've got, you know, elementary school kids trying to focus online, which, you know, God bless them, because I don't know how you know, get them to sit still that long. But there's all these different stuff. I have a dog, so my dog, you know, will distract me. But we all have different things that distract us. And so making sure in this is very unusual times. So making sure those people the people that need extra time to focus on their family know that they have that flexibility, give them the flexibility to do that, and get, you know, either the kids situated in front of the computer or driven to wherever they need to get driven to, so that you can come back to your office at home and work and really focus. And I think that helps a lot. And people kind of going, oh, okay, they're not, you know, you're not expecting me to be able to juggle, you know, 5 things with 2 hands, right? I can actually put something and get it done, and put down and go over here and focus on something else. I think that's really huge from a mental perspective, right? People can mentally then go, oh, okay, I've only got 3 things to focus on instead of 5. So I think that's really huge. That's the first thing, is definitely super important for the people that work for you to know that they've got that, if you can give them that flexibility, that they have it. And I think that what keeps me up at night, you know, to kind of go into that scenario, is really protecting all the different places and all the different ways we access our data. And one of the things that is a great opportunity to give some limelight to is disaster recovery.
Oh,
right.
okay.
Because when, you know, if you're in the cloud, if you're, you know, most of your workload's in the cloud, it's not that hard to set up. Like, we're not standing up, you know, like we used to with DR. But disaster recovery is super important, because if you do, and we're talking about data exfiltration, but they have to get in order to steal the data, right? So if they're in, there's a lot of ransomware stories going on, right? And so you want to be able to recover from that as fast as possible. If something bad happens, if it's out of control, you know, and it becomes out of your control. So I think it's important to think about, how would you recover from that? And poor old disaster recovery always gets left off the budget. You know, it's a good time to say, hey, what is our plan? And do we have one? And is it effective?
JD, I just was wondering, from your perspective, you have a very unique role, right? You're certainly managing your IT security infrastructure at Code 42, and then you are, you know, working with customers every single day as well. Have you seen really any just drastic, you know, changes or just some plan changes even to the endpoint data protection solutions out there, or cloud security measures, and even identity management and access governance types of things going on? Do you see any more initiatives, or are you guys doing anything like that?
Yeah, I think the largest trend that I'm seeing is a movement to the endpoint. So if you think of the companies that were kind of most suited to take on the work from home kind of in a moment's notice, it was those companies that have most of their workloads in some sort of cloud location, and then also the companies that have the right visibility on the endpoint. I think this is going to take lots of time, lots of smart people working at it, but we're moving far away from the traditional network setup, and we're moving to a scenario where anybody can connect from anywhere, and they need to get access to the things that they need to get access to, which forces a lot of security teams to rethink their security controls. No longer can we look at traffic on a network. We have to understand what's happening across our environment, but we gotta see it from the endpoint, because we have, you know, hundreds of machines connecting from all over the world, and whether that's coffee shops or home networks or whatnot, we still need visibility to what's going on, and so that tooling has to sit at that network level, or at that endpoint level.
Well, great. We seem to have a lot of questions from the audience about what we're talking about today. So I'm thinking maybe we should sort of go ahead and shift over there and kind of grab some of those questions. Our first question is from William Lidster, and he says, awareness work is important. The idea is not to make employees smarter, but to change their behavior. And phishing campaigns are a traditional method, and there has been significant variances in the success rate of those. What other awareness behavior influencing methods are you considering for your organization? So anyone want to take a stab at that?
I can share one thing that we've put together. We didn't really know exactly how successful this would be, but you know, we're a security company. We want people to understand security. We benefit in the sense of, because we're a security company, many people are interested in the subject matter and want to understand what all are the aspects of security practice. And so we developed what we call a security ninja program. It has 5 different belts. For each belt, there's a standard set of things that the employee has to complete. So whether that's taking a small exam or watching certain webinars, or reading a security article and presenting your reaction on Slack to the rest of your employees. We have kind of those set up by belt. And then in each of the belts, we also do monthly phishing. If you ever fail one of the monthly phishing tests, you are not allowed to get your belt that quarter. But then we give out the belts every single quarter. And when we did have badges in the office, it was just kind of a badge tag that showed the color belt that you were on. So the whole company got involved, and we had these quarterly celebrations to hand out employees new belts, which kind of kept that security education alive throughout our company.
Very interesting. Let's go on to Gary Sprague's question, okay? With many choices for social media, as JD indicated, stress from working from home and fear of loss from employment, there's a good solution for preventing and detecting loss of company data via social media. Janet, I think you said you wanted to take a stab at Gary's thought there.
Yeah, actually, Gary asked a second question that I was looking at. I apologize. I hadn't even seen this one.
Okay. Well, let me jump ahead to his other question then. With more and more applications becoming cloud apps, data loss prevention is more difficult. And as these apps are available virtually from anywhere at any time, how do you successfully make sure that the DLP is equally applied to all of these? So that's a good question, Gary. And it was a good thought. I think Gary's first thing was more of a thought. So Janet.
Yeah. Hey, Gary. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for asking the question, Gary. So we have, we also have workloads in the cloud, as almost every company does now. And I think the thing that I find to be most successful is to really dig into the cloud's native security tools, and in partnership with working with the development teams. So the advantage of that is you get what I call moving security left, and they build security into what they develop. So what goes out into the cloud is more secure, and they understand the platform that they're working on, that they're developing in. So they become aware of where all those potential ways of configuring the platform the cloud platforms can make the company vulnerable, as well as focusing security monitoring right on the cloud, right? It's not something that's like, it's not a black box. You've got to get in it. You've got to understand it. And these cloud offerings have great native security tools that can help you. And even there's third-party tools as well that can do a lot of monitoring for you and turn up where your high-risk areas are. And we turn those into educational scenarios.
Excellent. So we've got an anonymous attendee asking a question, but they're Code 42 customers, so that's exciting. JD, and this is really for JD. JD, what strategic advice can you provide in complementing Code 42 in an emerging DLP practice? Would love to learn from you on what would be good next steps to take.
Yeah, first and foremost, thanks for being a customer. That's exciting. So as it relates to DLP practice and what we're offering from our Code 42 solution, my marketing team doesn't like when I say this, but I very much think that we fit and we meet the needs of DLP for many customers. The way I think about it, like I ran DLP programs for 4 or 5 years. What we're doing at Code 42 is kind of the next evolution of that. So in the old way of doing things, we made everybody classify every little piece of data, and then we put up all of these walls around blocking information out of the organization. The way that we're trying to approach this at Code 42 is the same concept. We want to protect your data, and that's the same concept of what DLP programs did in the past, but what we're trying to do is monitor data leaving the organization to risky sites or personal storage locations or personal emails. We're not blocking the information from leaving. We're alerting you to high risk activity so that your security team can dig in, understand it, reach out to employees, educate them on proper ways to share data, or educate them on where data can be stored, where it can't be stored. So a little bit of a different angle. The other thing that's really interesting about what we're doing is in the old approach, you had to put in policies in order to catch certain things leaving. Our approach is very different in the sense that we're monitoring all file movement on your endpoint. And so there's no need to put in a very specific policy in order to see, you know, somebody in your organization moving lots of files out to their personal Dropbox account.
Okay, and this kind of goes to Todd Fitzgerald's question. Are you seeing an increase in intrusion attempts since the pandemic started? And if so, where? Ladies, what about you across the board? Are you seeing increases in intrusion attempts since COVID kind of came about, and what kinds of ones are you might be seeing?
So I can start. I mean, yes, increase in intrusion everywhere. Phishing, I think, is reported threefold up over what it was prior. You know, the adversaries are going to pry off people being stressed. They're going to pry off bad situations. And so as sad as it is, like, they use something like a pandemic to get access to environments and to launch certain attacks.
Okay, we've got a good question here from William Lidster. Another question. We call the current environment unusual. That's true. I think it implies that we're waiting to get back to the usual times, but what if we don't get back there and to these usual and these times truly become the new normal? What are you guys thinking about strategically, roadmap wise? And what about a future environment and just preparing for it? I think that's a great question, William. Anyone want to take a stab at that?
Yes. So I think it's a great comment, because if you hear what a lot of companies are saying is, hey, my workforce has proven to me that, to the company, that they can work remote, be successful working remote. And so I think we're going to see a huge shift. And so I think it is, you know, I love what JD, how you describe Code 42 and what it's doing. And I think we need to think about it from that perspective. It adopting the concept of work from anywhere. Your employees need to be able to do their job from anywhere. And I think if we really take a focus on that and really look at what are the security controls that we need to have in place, what security can you put in place to enable that work from anywhere? And I think that's really where we need to go as a security thought leadership.
We've got time for one more question, and I'm going to take Marina Toro's question. Since we've all been working remotely, I feel like it's so important to over communicate with your teams, explore their challenges and clarifications for their daily, weekly workflow. That has helped us with our CISO, Don Capelli, and the importance of the support is key. So the question actually is directed towards you, Marion. You mentioned that the monthly phishing campaigns are the campaigns focused solely on email exfiltration. What about your internal IP, data, and PII? Because, you know, you guys are a manufacturer, so you would have that.
Right. No, our campaigns are all over the place. And actually what we do on a monthly basis is we have a general campaign, and then we have a targeted campaign. So maybe this month we're going to target an HR team, or we may target the legal team. And so we spice it up every month. And part of it comes from what we're seeing. So if we get a huge hit on a phishing campaign, we'll use some of that data to actually mock up how we're going to do for that month. So no, it's got to be all over the place. And I think you just have to really watch what's coming in to your company. What are the things that you're able to block, and really take that data and use it to educate your employee base.
Well, wonderful. Thank you, ladies. What a great discussion we had today. It was a lot of fun with all of you. I wish we certainly were all together. Folks at home, I would love for you guys to take the survey. We'd love your feedback as well. And don't forget about that CPE credit, and give us your CISSP number if you do need that information, and we will send you the information to deposit into your account tomorrow. Some things to kind of put on the calendar. We have ISE Northeast coming up on October 6th. And of course, we have ISE North America Leadership Summit and Awards November 12th and 13th. All of our events at T.E.N right now are digital, but we'd love for you to join us and celebrate these security executives and project teams. And if you're interested, we can send you that information or just register on our website. I just want to say thank you, Code 42, for being our sponsor today. And thank you, ladies, again, for joining me this afternoon for our ISE Fireside Chat. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Everyone, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time, and hopefully we'll see you at one of our ISE programs coming up as well. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.